So coming to that and being guided into that enlightenment, and also being freed and being exposed or exposing the misinformation that's presented before us. Because see, by misinformation, it creates distortions, it creates delusions, and what happens, we perpetuate and we assimilate that misinformation. We begin to carry that thing out, and we begin to reproject that. And so what happens is that we begin to cast shadows in life and illusions in life, and life becomes obscure because we are not co-mingling with people of light. And so that's something that's very interesting in the Surahs when they mention that in the Quran. All right? So in the midst of also understand, let's go back to what Yeshua sat there and said, is that if you follow his path, what he's talking about, he advocated a path. I'm the truth, the way, and the life. So he's talking about a way, a path, a course to enlightenment. Okay? And so when you say light of life, put it together, it means, enlightenment. It means illumination. Okay, so he was saying, I have prescribed, I'm advocating a practice in a mode or a system of knowledge, a body of principles that will transition you from the place of walking the path of being distorted or being blind or being in a place of ambiguity, where life seems very questionable, it seems very puzzling, it seems like a riddle, it seems like you're in a conundrum. Okay? And so what he was saying is, I provided a method. You follow my method, you follow my path, and this is going to bring you to a place of illumination, enlightenment. All right, it's very interesting, in the Psalms that sit there says basically the law. In other words, a very refined code of action. Once it is ingested, once it is assimilated, can enlighten the eyes. So there's a proper action that we need to embrace, behaviorally speaking. All right, and there's a way we need to be able to think it correctly and also right speech. And so we hear those things in those that observe the Kemetic, philosopher, the Neterism angle, which I love. It talks about mat, saying right speech, right action, righteousness, so forth. And those in the Vedic thought, we're going to talk about dharma, so the way of truth, righteousness, and right action, right speech, and etc. So there's a path, and I want to bring that out. So when we talk about enlightenment, there's a path of practices that brings about an experience to lessen the misinformation that we have consumed, that we have assimilated, or that we're entertaining. And then also there's a freeing up of ignorance. Now, interesting, I love this. There's a sutra in the Bhagavad Gita where it talks about, by destroying ignorance comes by the knowledge of the self within. Understand that the light and the truth that we seek is within. Okay? We got to understand that. So, very practically speaking, so that means there has to be a process where we have to turn within and to look at ourselves and understand. Once we begin to understand ourselves and we understand the things that's blocking us or preventing us, to begin to accept sound information that benefits us and that's not working against us. As we begin to entertain those things, we begin to slowly put ourselves in a position where we can start becoming enlightened. Think about the word enlightened, enlightenment. And so there's a process of receiving light, receiving a high vibratory energy, that we're able to embody and become, and it registers in our mind. And so in our thoughts, as we register this light, we begin to bring light actions to other people, which goes back to what I said earlier, be ye lights. In other words, be ye enlightenment, be ye the illumination. Now also, as we go back into what Yeshua talked about, if you follow this path, you'll be into the light of life. Very, 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 very interesting. So here's something that I want to bring out. There's a Greek word, epiphanio, like epiphanies. We get the word epiphanies. Okay? So basically the saying is, as you walk this path, this practical path, this practical practice, this particular methodology of a spiritual practice, you eventually will begin to experience epiphanies. In other words, you start receiving flashes of reality, which means you're developing an intuitive ability to grasp the reality of things. That will begin to heighten. And so as you begin that, the benefit is it will lessen our indecisions. a lot of our problems that we have in our life, a lot of the mistakes or the errors that we create, the drama, the suffering, the things that we experience in our life, it really comes from somebody or from us that made an indecision. And so life is a decision as well. Life is a relationship, but life is also decisions. And so the goal is, what I love in the Kemetic thought, and I want to go on record to say this as well, I'm sorry I meant to say this earlier, is that there's a Commission proverb which sits there and says, the goal of life is to entertain a higher consciousness and to rise above the body, the realm of the body, fleshy things, which talking about the aim in life is to experience a spiritual awakening. And in the Kemetic understanding is the word nahash, which is talking about a spiritual awakening. In other words, enlightenment. So the goal, if you're on a spiritual path, is to experience an enlightenment that calls you to rise above the things that are superficial in life, things that are flighty, things that are fleeting, things that are perishable. Okay? That's why it connected said the bodily, because the body is perishable. You know what I'm saying? Eventually the body will return from where it came from, the earth, the dust. Okay? So all this revolves around what we're talking about, enlightenment. Okay? So enlightenment also is the process of receiving divine principles to help convert our soul. So in other words, it begins to, enlightenment, also the process of enlightenment is to cause or to bring our souls into a conversion, to begin to reform itself, refashion itself, rebuild itself, okay? And so these are the things, so in order to have that experience, we have to experience an epiphany, a series of frequent epiphanies. That comes along, that's the benefit for entertaining a spiritual path. That's why I reference that scripture, that Yeshua, where he made mention of that, because I think it just makes it very, very clear and brings it very, very, makes it very, very relevant, is that all of us have access to experience frequent epiphanies to give us insight into what's going on around us in our life, to heighten our awareness, to bring us to a higher level of consciousness, to bring us to understand the truth in every different area in our lives. And the benefit, it lessens our indecisions, which means we begin to bring ourselves to balance. We bring ourselves to certainty. We bring ourselves to a sense of clarity. And we bring ourselves to a place of understanding. And when we have understanding, we begin to develop a peace of mind. So when we talk about the path of enlightenment, one of the benefits also, another benefit of enlightenment is it brings about a peace of mind. So I'm just kind of shooting the vibe right now, but I'm going to go ahead and end right here, so I'm going to keep it kind of short. But I'll be back, and we'll dig more, deep